experiences with these issues. You heard earlier a little bit about Rocky Flats, and I grew up right next to Rocky Flats. Our house was 3 miles away. We could see the water tower from our back porch. Rocky Flats from 1952 to 1992 produced more than 70,000 plutonium pits for nuclear bombs. We had no idea. The rumor in the neighborhood, because the facility was operated by Dow Chemical, the rumor in the neighborhood was that they were making household cleaning supplies. My mother thought they were making scrubbing bubbles. Neither one of us was very fond of housework, and so we thought that was, boring. Then over time, we slowly became aware of some of the things that were going on at Rocky Flats, but the community was largely unaware. It wasn't until there was a raid in 1989, which Jay mentioned earlier, the only time in the history of our country where 2 government agencies have raided another. To the best of my knowledge, the FBI and the EPA raided the plant. That led to a 2-year grand jury investigation that was scuttled, and a grand jury report that is still sealed to the present day. Rocky Flats has a very, very controversial history. There was extensive radioactive and toxic contamination, both on-site and off-site. There were many fires at Rocky Flats, of which the public was unaware, largely unaware. One in 1957 and one in 1969. The 1969 fire happened on May 11th, Mother's Day, when my family, we were out having Mother's Day brunch, and we were completely unaware of the fact that there was a radioactive cloud traveling over our heads. Independent testing after that point showed that there was plutonium contamination as far as 30 miles away from the plant. The story of Rocky Flats continues to the present day. There was a class action lawsuit that began in 1990, right after the raid, that took 20 years to move through the courts. In 2006, on behalf of more than 12,000 residents, we were awarded, the jury decided in our favor. Rockwell appealed. 3 years later, that decision was overturned. And just 3 weeks ago, the Supreme Court declined to review that case. So very disappointing about that. And this is not a historical story, this is a story that continues to the present day. Rocky Flats no longer produces plutonium pits for nuclear bombs, but there's still a lot of stuff out there. It is now closed, and if you look at the land, it looks pristine. It is not pristine. There's more than 6,000 acres out there. 1,300 acres are so profoundly contaminated that they can never open to the public. The rest of the site is slated to open as a national wildlife refuge and public recreation area with very controversial levels of contamination, plutonium in particular. I neglected to mention that, like many of the kids in my neighborhood, I eventually went to work at Rocky Flats myself, and worked there for a relatively short period of time. And I'll just share very briefly one quick story from my book. When I worked at Rocky Flats, I was a single parent with 2 kids, putting myself through graduate school. And Rocky Flats was considered to be the best job in town. Great pay, good benefits, and everyone, lots and lots of people in my neighborhood worked at Rocky Flats, and of course no one could talk about what they actually did. And even the workers at the plant were largely unaware of what happened at the plant. There was a policy of containment, which is also true at other nuclear weapon sites, where workers in one area were largely unaware of what workers in another area were doing. So even though I myself worked at the plant, I didn't really know what was going on. I was typing up memos, reports that went to Washington that contained acronyms like MUF. MUF, have you ever heard of MUF? I thought, well, that's really a strange term. MUF stands for Missing Unaccounted for Plutonium. And over the course of almost 30 years, Rocky Flats misplaced more than 3,000 pounds of plutonium. And that's a DOE figure, there's no exaggeration there. But at any rate, briefly, there's one evening where I came home from work, I picked up my kids from school, gave them their baths and their suppers and put them to bed and came downstairs to have a cup of tea. And I turned on the television, and there was a Nightline program on television, an expose. on Rocky Flats. And I saw people that I worked with every day, including Mark Silverman, the Department of Energy manager out there, talking about how profoundly contaminated the site was and how profound the contamination was off-site. Soil and water contamination, and plutonium particles and breathable plutonium particles and that sort of thing. And the fact that there was more than 14 tons of plutonium stored on site, much of it unsafely stored. I was stunned. I did not know this. I grew up next to the plant. I worked out at the plant. We were very unaware of what was happening. That was the day that I knew that I would quit, and the day that I quit was the day that I knew I would write a book. And I think that the most powerful way to tell these kinds of stories, to convey this information, who wants to read a book about plutonium? You know, but people want to hear and need to hear the kinds of stories of people like me and people who live and grew up around these sites, and how our lives and our health have been so profoundly affected. So, thank you.